Today we're going to talk about how to put on buttons, but the first thing that you need to know is about fabric. There's lots of different kinds of fabric out in the world, but the thing that you need to know is there's a right side and a wrong side. The right side is the really bright side. The wrong side is the back side of the fabric. Some fabrics you can tell, some fabrics you can't. Like this blue fabric, it's the same on both, so you get to choose which side you want to put the buttons on. What we're going to do today is we're going to use burlap. Now, I've drawn some flowers on one side of the burlap, and you really can't see the other side. So we're going to call this the wrong side, and we're going to call this side the right side. When you put buttons on, we got 3 different kinds of buttons. We have a 4-hole button, we've got a 2-hole button, and a shank button. The shank button is a button that has a little loop on the side or on the back. It's used the same way it's just more decorative on the front, so it's not interrupted by holes. All right. Then the next thing you do is you find some thread that matches. Where I'm going to do thread that doesn't match just so that you can see the different stitches. You put the thread on. For a 2-hole and a shank button, you want the thread to be about 3 feet long. And for the 4-hole button, you want the thread to be about 5 feet long. When you put the thread onto the needle, you want to make sure that your ends are even. So we'll go ahead and make our ends even. Once they're even, then we need to tie a knot. Now, tying a knot on your thread, the messier the knot, the bigger the knot, the better, because you don't want it to come through the fabric. So what I'm going to do is show you how I tie a knot in my thread. I'm right-handed, so I moisten the pointer finger of my left finger. Then I make an X with the thread, and then I just roll it off with my thumb, and I pull on it, and I have a nice big knot. The idea is, again, that when you put the thread through the fabric, that it doesn't come out. All right, so now that I've got the thread through the fabric, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to start with the 2-hole button. The 2-hole button is easy to do. It's just 2 holes, and when you do the thread, you always want to take the knot from the back side or the wrong side of the fabric, and then you pull it really tight against the fabric, and you go ahead and you put the needle through one of the holes of the button, and then you go ahead and you put the needle through the other hole, and you put the needle through the fabric close to where the knot is at. And you pull it tight, but don't do it fast because you might get a big loop in there. So now we've got the button really snug against the fabric and tight on the bottom. Then you go ahead and close to where the knot is at, you poke through looking for the hole that you started with, pull your thread tight snug against the fabric, and you go back down through. So if you think about it, you go up, through, and down. Okay, and you always want to pull your thread snug. All right, and you do that 6 times. My rule is 6 times because you don't want the thread to come loose when you're doing the button or when you're using the button. So let's pretend I've already gone through 6 times. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take the thread, you're going to put it through the fabric, but not through the button. You're going to bring it up through the fabric, but under the button, and you pull it snug. So if you notice, it's not through the button, it's through the fabric under the button. Then you're going to take the fabric, you're going to wad it, and you're going to wrap the thread around underneath the button twice. Then you're going to take the needle, put it through the wrap. I don't know if you can see that. Put it through the wrap under the button. Pull it tight. And then you cut the thread off underneath the button so you can't see it. Okay? Then, when you go to do the 4-hole button, it's the same idea. You pretend you got two 2-hole buttons. You start with the first set of 2, and you run it through just like you would the 2-hole button. But before you tie it off, before you knot it off, go ahead and go through the other 2 holes of the 4-hole button. And then you go ahead and you wrap it underneath the button, between the button and the fabric, and then put the needle through the wrap, and you cut off the thread. Don't ever cut the thread off close to the wrap, because it might come loose. So you want a little bit of a length, but you want to hide it under the button so you can't see it. Now, to do the shank button, let me cut this off. To do the shank button, it's basically the same idea as the 4-hole or the 2-hole button. You go ahead, you tie your knot, pull it tight, get a nice big, I call it an icky knot, because you don't want it to go through your fabric. So I'm going to use my shank button. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to use my shank button in the middle of that flower. So I'm going to pull from the wrong side or the back side. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull my thread through the back of the fabric, through where the dot that I want to sew through. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the needle through the shank, drop the button there. I'm going to put the needle in close to where it came up from the bottom, pull it tight, and now your shank is snug against the fabric, and you don't have any loose thread in the back. Then what you do for the next stitch is you put the thread up through where the knot was at, through under the button, pull it tight, go ahead and put it through the shank, okay, snug, and then you want to put it back down through approximately where you put it through on the other side, okay? So my way of thinking is you put it up through the bottom of the fabric, through the shank, and down close to where it came up from. So it's up, through, and down, up, through, and down. To tie it off, again, you want 6 times. Every time you do a button, you want to stitch through 6 times. So we're going to pretend that we did 6 times. We're going to bring the thread up again on our pretend 7th time. Then we're going to wrap. We're going to wrap just like we did the 2-hole button. We're going to wrap underneath the button, and then we're going to put the needle through the wrap, making sure it's snug the entire time. And then we're going to cut under the button. Oh, see how it's showing? So I'm going to trim it just a little bit more, and now the button is done. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, this is a good way of doing this, because then you can start and stop. And again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.